Crunch the Crocodile by Josephine Crozer, illustrated by Carol McLean Carr. Once there was a peaceful river. On the banks of this river lived a greedy crocodile. His name was Crunch. All the creatures of the river would tremble when they heard his voice. Crunch and munch, crunch and munch. My name is Crunch, and I want my lunch. When the fish heard him coming, they would swim away. When the frogs heard him coming, they would hop away. When the worms heard him coming, they would wriggle away. When the snakes heard him coming, they would slither away. When the lizards heard him coming, they would run. One morning, very early, before the sun brought warmth to the damp river air, the creatures held a secret meeting. Crunch had made them all afraid. "We're too small to fight him," said a fish. "That's why we swim away." "Right, he's too big for all of us," said one of the frogs. "He creeps up on us when we sit on our nests," said a bird sadly. "He squashes us into the mud with his feet," said a worm. "He snaps at us when we lie on the rocks to warm ourselves in the sun," said a lizard and a snake together. The creatures plotted and planned. The first rays of light were touching the trees when they quietly went back to their homes. It wasn't long before they heard a familiar sound. "Crunch and munch, crunch and munch. My name is Crunch, and I want my lunch." How they hated that sound. But today, they had been waiting for it. Today, they had a plan. As Crunch came creeping and searching and snapping his great toothy jaws, the fish swam towards him. The frogs hopped towards him. The birds flew towards him. The worms wriggled towards him. The snakes slithered towards him, and the lizards ran. Crunch saw them coming, and his bulgy eyes bulged bigger. The fish were chasing him. The frogs were chasing him. The birds and lizards and snakes and worms were all coming nearer and nearer. What a big, gigantic, monstrous meal Crunch could have. All he had to do was open his mouth and let them come in. But Crunch was not only greedy, he was also a terrible coward. He could hear the lizards' feet tapping as they ran, the birds' wings flapping as they flew, and the fish's tails swishing as they swam. All the creatures stared at Crunch as they came closer and closer. Crunch turned. Crunch ran. He slipped in the mud and splashed in the water as he hurried and scurried away. Crunch kept going. He didn't want any swimming, running, hopping, wriggling, or flapping things coming after him. The creatures of the river stopped and listened. Crunch kept on running. The birds twittered, the frogs croaked, and the worms glugged in the mud. Then the creatures turned from the chase. The fish swam, the frogs hopped, the birds flew, the worms wriggled, the snakes slithered, and the lizards stood up and ran home to their own part of the river. By evening, the river was peaceful again. When the shadows of the trees were long and dark upon the water, and wind was sweeping ripples through the reeds, the creatures of the river fell asleep.